All right, before we delve into the Daily Nation behind me here, we have Professor Alfred Omenya in studio. Prof, I'm just curious what you made of the scenes we saw last night and of which Leila Mohammed made reference. And for me, just to see that, as Dennis calls it, that security reinforcement, those red berets, I'm calling them red berets, Dennis, you'll correct me. You understand this much better than I do.
Yes.
But those, they're wearing red berets, okay?
Right.
So those red berets,
correct,
were they armed? Did I see them armed? Can we see that picture of bombers again? So that I can see, you know, just what does it communicate to you?
Yeah, I think, thanks Olive and Dennis, it's always a pleasure. Yeah, I think it was good that they were actually brought in because we know everywhere where we bring politicians, even just as observers, they're always likely to do things that are not exactly, you know, required by the law. They're always likely to go against the law as it actually were. And I think, of course, IBC also needs to send that message that they are in control of the process. They'll not be pushed by anybody. And they do have the requisite enforcement that they can actually enforce. In fact, you saw there was a bit of you know, pushback from the politicians on both sides as to why they're being kicked out of the tallying center. Yeah, but as it were, these guys normally bring in more heat than light in these processes. Yes, and of course, if you look at this in the context of the fact that the tallying was taking forever, as we're told, 3 to 4 hours to clear, and again, a mathematical problem, yeah, because simulations by IBC should have already told them that the length of time this would actually take and determine a priori the maximum you know, amount of time that they'd be processing an officer, and they should have been able to pick this earlier. Yeah, so for me, I mean, if I was in the shoes of Chebukati, I would have done exactly the same, kick these guys out. But having kicked them out, you know, ensure that the process that is in place can actually be able to deliver the constitutional mandate of IBC, you know, accurate, reliable, efficient results, you know, within the time. Because now we're starting to question whether all of that, you know, will still be delivered. But yes, I think that was the correct thing to do. Of course, the Red Berets, as you call them, or the GSU are the ones that whose mandate in the forces of the Republic of Kenya is to restore public order. So those guys are just doing the right thing. In fact, it's the correct contingent to be used in those sort of situations. You know,
Chebukati can't lock them out. I guess the best he can do is manage those who have access to the floor. But Davy is our vision mixer. Just give us the boomers picture again here so that I can confirm my eyes were not playing tricks on me. Dennis, you're telling me this is nothing new? I can see one here, another here. There was one here when Leila was speaking.
Well, when it comes to the security infrastructure around an auditorium like this, remember, they're done preps, the security arrangement before even voting began. And from the moment this exercise started on Wednesday.
See those ones walking down?
Yes, and last night we kept seeing them walking down that red carpet staircase to the floor to just maintain order. So we have a mix. Generally speaking, this is the Kenya Police Service. But under the Kenya Police Service, so you have the GSU, which is the paramilitary wing of the police service. And their training is a bit different. So it's specialized. You can see the vantage points.
What I want to know is, what are they carrying? Are they carrying...
well, they're armed. You know, they're armed. They carry the batons.
Oh, it's a baton.
They carry the batons. Okay. They'll carry. They are allowed to carry arms in an event like this.
Remember when students would strike unambiwa?
You know, Kitam,
Fanya Fujo
One, the dreaded Fanya Fujo One GSU wing. So what you see in that auditorium, you see the different vantage points. And every officer that you see in this auditorium has a duty and a responsibility, and they're reporting to a commanding officer. So at this point, you see them how they're stationed. It clearly tells you that there are points where you have gaps, where you could get a threat, either from coming from the red stairs. There are those who are manning the podium where Chebukati and the commissioners make these announcements. You can see some of them stationed around the metal barriers around the floor of Bomas of Kenya. So this is their job. This is their duty. And we saw them taking out some people who are perhaps, causing the drama and the chaos that we were witnessing. Their job is just to maintain law and order. That's the only thing. And they're following instructions from their commanding officer.
The ones I saw were the officers in blue. That's the Kenya Police.
All these are police officers.
Or as Rigathi Gachagua would say, PCA Women's Guild. But
not Women's Guild. Okay, police.
Yeah, but this is not new, Olive. Going back to your question, and Prof, because you've also witnessed a lot of these elections. Right. This is not new. In 2013,
in fact, this is scaled down.
This is scaled down,
this
according to you.
Scaled down, yeah.
Why do you say that? Yeah,
I'm not seeing as many as, we saw this particularly in 2013. Yeah, and we also saw this in the 2007. The numbers that were there and the optics were really, were really looking bad. It's like Bomas was a riot. And of course, with politicians from both sides behaving badly and so on. Yeah, so this is actually quite modest, optically. I don't know how many...
So this is no surprise for either.
No, not at all.
No, it's not a surprise.
If the surprise would have been the other way around, if they were not there.
Yeah. So what?
But that says a lot, doesn't it?
Exactly, it does.
It says a lot of our electoral process.
Correct.
That it would have been strange for them not to have been present.
Exactly. And it's obvious, of course, the reason why that tallying is taking forever is simply because of the high levels of distrust in the Kenyan process. At least the one thing that every Kenyan does, and is their constitutional right, is to mistrust each other. So we don't trust you at all. So the parties don't trust each other. They still think something may go wrong. They don't trust IBC and so on. And we're saying this trust deficit has to be actually dealt with. We keep making reference to Ghana. Ghana, last elections promised they would deliver results in 24 hours. They actually delivered in 48 hours. The statistics is almost exactly the same as Kenya. Exact number of voters. You're looking at about 17,000 registered voters. 17 million. 14 million registered, very hotly contested. The person who ended up winning that election won it with 51%. The loser was at 47%. Very, very interesting statistics. You may also, if you remove names, you might think exactly the Kenyan election. And I think the question we should be asking is that how are they able to do it so efficiently? And I don't know the answer yet, but I suspect one of the issues is trust. People trust the process.
But Prof, is this a case of, as some put it yesterday, a case of it being difficult to convince a thief that others are not stealing?
Yes, of course. I think that's the same thing that we are saying, that when I meet any Kenyan, and I've been told, when I meet any Kenyan, I expect them to steal from me. And vice versa, they also expect me to steal from them. So because of that, I have to check over and over again that I'm still safe, that my stuff has not been stolen. Even after the end of the process, you're still checking, did I lose something? Yeah, so actually, our politics has had that, inbuilt in it as infrastructure. Generally, our government has been pretty opaque in some things. IBC itself, has a past all the way till you remember that determination in High Court to open servers. The different political contenders have adequate number of thieves on both sides, and they know each other. So they actually expect, they don't expect that the thieves retired. So they still expect their stuff to be stolen. So because of this, then, we are now ending up with layers and layers and layers of confirmation. I mean, a basic thing that, that is being highlighted in terms of the Bomas process is that people are still going to the polling station numbers, and not just the polling station. People are going to streams numbers to be able to confirm. Hence, Chebukati's complaint that this is not actually a forensic audit. Why is that happening in the first instance? I mean, it is lack of trust.
Leila talked about Rachel Shebesh demanding UV lights to confirm the security features of those papers.
Exactly.
And rightly so. But, you know, the other question is, Prof, just to add on to the question that Olive asked you earlier, the level, you know, mistrust that we have.
Right.
The simulation that IBC did, because we saw Fuller Chebukati yesterday admitting that it's taking 3 to 4 hours to process one returning officer.
Correct.
And so many of them had spent, you know, 3 days there just on queue waiting to be processed.
Right.
Saying that they're reviewing the, you know, the processes and everything. To prepare for an election, in the entire period that they've had the opportunity to do so and going through the simulations, do you feel there's also a failure in logistical planning and to foresee a situation where you're obviously going to deal with politicians who are going to try and disrupt and create all this drama, but just in terms of looking at the quality, the protocols of quality control and those logistics, is there an issue that IEBC needs to deal with?
No, definitely. And Dennis, I mean, some of us are sports people, and you see, you know, serious teams, whether in soccer or in basketball and so on. You find that these people spend a lot of time watching previous matches, you know, starting to see where was this, how did we concede this goal, what was the pattern and all these sort of things. And then eventually the coach then plans, you know, develops his game plan. The IBC that we have now has actually conducted an election. This is not the first election. It would be interesting to find out what insights they had, because it's very easy to determine how long you're going to take. I mean, a returning officer is going to take, you know, when it's being processed, because IBC has processed this in the past. In fact, with the contenders being almost the same people. It would have been, I don't know, but it would have been interesting to know from IBC. If I meet them, I would ask them, fine, I mean, in the 2017 election, these processes to the detail, how long did it take, for example, in that 2017 to process a returning officer? What were the challenges with that process? And how have you actually fixed that? In fact, for me, and then the beauty is that that's the stuff that you'll use for simulation to ensure that, you know, the process now goes a lot faster. But I mean, simulating as though you don't actually have historical data is quite stupid, actually, if I can actually put that. That IBC gets so far, myself, I don't have a lot of confidence in terms of the learnings. You see, for example, when IBC started, they started with a couple of desks. I think there were 3 or 4. And then they realized that, no, we need more desks. Why? Didn't they know that? I think that should have been obvious. The number of desks they needed to process these guys efficiently. Number 2, you know, when the process was now taking longer, IBC should have actually noticed immediately that the time that we have to process, you know, one returning officer, you know, is maybe 1 hour or 30 minutes, but we are actually processing them, you know, 3 to 4 hours. You know, can we go back and actually make these changes? Yes, so you don't actually get that sense in terms of details and very, very detailed simulations of how this process was actually to go. Yeah, because the audit, again, is not always just to catch the thief. The audit, even in normal corporate audit, the audit is to understand systems, is to understand processes, and see the best ways of improving them. And this is where, you know, where we're actually saying, fine, I mean, IBC still needs to have done better, because they're not just simulating. They've actually done actual elections, and they've gone through these processes in the past. Every single aspect of what they're doing now, they've actually done that in the past.
Is it a case where we're now learning the true meaning of patience pays? Because we have been demanding, politicians have been demanding for a fair, credible, a transparent election. And now that takes time. So the verification process It's taking time because they want to be transparent and
Right.
make sure that every single digit
Correct.
is not erroneous.
Correct.
But that the issue of taking time now is the price you have to pay because we have to be patient then.
Yes, yes and no. Yes, in this sense that it's not just the politician demanding, transparency and quality and efficiency. These are actually required by the Constitution and the IBC Act and several, Supreme Court rulings and declarations. Yes, so this is actually not surprising. But you see, being efficient is very different from being slow. I used to be an extremely good student of mathematics. The interesting thing was that when I slowed down, I would do my papers in 1 hour or 1.5 hours for 2.5 hour papers. And my own experience was that when I slowed down, I got the answers wrong. The point I'm actually trying to say here is that you can actually be efficient without necessarily being slow. Being slow is not necessarily being efficient. If I can put it that way. Just like driving again, the people who drive fast and they're extremely careful drivers. And the people who drive slow and they're totally reckless drivers. so it's not, those things are not the same. The thing is that you can be a very good driver, you drive within the law, you drive fast within the law, 0 accident records. On the other side, you can be somebody who sleeps in the highway and you're doing that at 20 kilometers per hour and you cause an accident. So for IBC now and in the future, being slow does not mean that you are efficient or thorough. Those are totally different things. You can still be, you can still do it efficiently and thorough. The other point I want to bring in is that what is being slow? You see, for me, if IBC took the entire 7 days, that, as far as I'm concerned, is still okay. It is still within the law. But it's IBC that's telling us that they're slow. You see, being slow here, what it means for me is that if you're meant to process a returning officer in 30 minutes, and you're processing that returning officer in 4 hours, then you're being slow. Then you're being inefficient. But if you're meant to process a returning officer in 4 hours, and you process that returning officers in 4 hours, then you're not being slow. You're actually being thorough, you're being efficient, and so on. Yes, so for me, it's these processes. Because you see, what you're asking is that, by yesterday, IBC had not processed half the ROs. And they'd taken, almost 60% of the time. So this fast processing that they're getting into, will they still be thorough? Those are the questions that we're asking. So, those internal consistencies, are the guarantors of quality. Yeah, and for me, it doesn't matter. I mean, IBC has 7 days. They can simulate this thing to happen within 7 days. The only danger there is that, if should anything happen that they didn't foresee, then they'll be in trouble. So, I mean, if I'm given 7 days, I'll work with a maximum of 45 days. That then gives me breathing space in case of any unforeseen things in such high-stake election.
But, Prof, can you then say the crafters of the Constitution had foreseen this situation? You see the disruptions that we've been witnessing at the moment, slowing down the process. Besides the intention to process a single returning officer that takes 3 to 4 hours, like Chebukati was saying, did they foresee this? And why then rush? Because Chebukati is still within the law.
Actually, nobody's asking Chebukati to rush. It's Chebukati that's telling us that the process is slow. We're ready to receive the results on Tuesday. But it's Chebukati who's telling us that these people in the podium are slowing the process. And it's Chebukati who's telling us that the returning officers are not being processed as quickly as they should have been. It's Chebukati who's telling us that the desks are not enough. It's Chebukati who's actually telling us that, processing one returning officer in 4 hours is too long. So it's actually Chebukati who's sending the message that, look here, guys, this thing is not as efficient as it should have been. And yes, we're doing things. But of course, to give him, of course, he's under pressure. And again, in situations like this, you have a lot of unforeseen situations. I think so far, despite all those things, there's confidence that, he will still be able to deliver a very credible result and deliver it within time. And still, I mean, would have expected better in terms of that process moving on. But maybe Chebukati overtrust politicians. I don't know. I didn't expect as much interference with this process as he had imagined. But of course, I mean, so far, really, I don't think there's been any cause for alarm. If anything, I mean, we also must look at this th-a-vis what has happened in the past. And I think my general sense is that Kenyans feel that there's been huge improvements, within the process. And still the principle for us is still the same, and is also a personal principle that you'd rather get it right than get it fast.
Okay.
Okay. So we get into the newspaper now, and a topic we discussed yesterday, Prof. Political dynasties, harvest mixed bag. Prominent families that have occupied high political offices since independence, including the Mois, Odingas, and Kihikas, and the Kajwang, Sunkuli, and Metangula brothers, record mixed fortunes in the August 9th polls. That is on page 6. School calendar at risk as Magoha extends closure. Dennis, this
for many parents is very, troubling, because if you look at the school calendar and how it was affected when COVID, hit the entire world, so many children are affected, parents were affected, those who were learning were affected, and now this was in 2020. Now this is 2022. We have an election. So the back-to-back interruptions are really, really affecting the school calendars. I had a conversation with a teacher yesterday because I personally got a message of taking my child to school on the date that Mago had announced, again to get another message that, okay, now we're extending. Psychologically, for the parents, for the students, even for the teachers, there's that level of uncertainty. Okay, so when are we opening the schools? And then looking at the schedules and the timetable and the curriculums they have to cover before they can then end the term, everything is disrupted. So what it then means, they have to really rush to keep up because we're already dealing with a backlog, So it's really a big issue for very many parents. In terms of even planning, when do you then take your child who's traveling from Mombasa, for example, to Kakamega? Those travel arrangements, for many parents, it's not as easy as it sounds. They need to make prior arrangements, and there are those who will argue you should know how to prepare better,
But shouldn't the Ministry of Education have known that the Constitution gives Chebukati 7 days to declare the results and therefore made the necessary adjustments, as opposed to now telling us the 11th, and then you come back again and tell us the 15th, then you come back and tell us the 18th. I mean, shouldn't you just have blocked out that entire 7 days and then now given parents a day or two to make arrangements to take the children back to school, and then...
I think, Prof, you're the governance expert. Just looking at the agencies and the institutions that were coming together, thinking of an election, it's not just involving IEBC.
Right.
The security stakeholders have to be involved. The ODPP office has to be involved. And all these institutions within government, how is it supposed to work normally? Because from the changing of dates, like what Olive is saying, sends a very confusing message and conflicting message that there is no synergy, there is no single source of information coming from, one center,
Right. And I think this is actually quite disappointing, especially given this election, because for this election, the government that is in place is actually leaving. The president and his executive are leaving, which means that they're not bogged down, okay, in theory, they're not bogged down with the competition, with the parties competing. So you expect the country to be really, well managed, and this particular period well managed, because the guys who are running government are not necessarily, the two competing parties. And then, of course, as you say, there are very many agencies that work during this period, and of course we still expect all the ministers are working during this period until the handing over, until a new president has been elected, and then a new executive actually comes and takes over. And this is the same even with the counties. Mombasa and Kakamega will proceed until those governors hand over. And as you say, it seems like there's a bit of a broken there's a break in the system, in this sense that, again, we know that it takes 1 week. There's that 1 week from the time we vote to the time that elections declared. And it's just 1 week. After that, there's the possibilities of court processes. And again, the Constitution has clearly envisaged those and given deadlines for those particular processes and so on. What you'd expect is that the government that is in place has already organized and planned for these things, all the way till the assumption. But sometimes you almost have a sense that there's a bit of, that people will somehow believe that IBC should be running the country during this electoral period. IBC is doing what they're doing, counting votes, but we expect all the different government agencies to work together. So Magoha definitely is a letdown on this, and it tells you how things are done within government. You know, we should be operating on the basis of the law. And as Olive says it, you know, how do you ask students to go to school on Monday while you know the law allows IBC, you know, to do the tallying until Tuesday? Unless the Ministry of Education does not think that that tallying affects, you know, the running of schools. And it actually does affect the running of schools. Yes, so in fact, what they would have done would have been to send the message that they sent as now, initially, to say it's Thursday, because yes, I mean, the announcement will be done by Tuesday, as per the law, not necessarily how things, you don't look at boomers and then make decisions on how to run government. Yeah, so all these processes, I mean, we saw, for example, in internal security, you know, starting to deploy security in different parts of the country. Yeah, because these guys have information, they know what's happening. They should be able to predict, you know, where we're likely to have rough issues and so on. And all these agencies are meant to be working together, complete with IBC. Yeah, and of course, communicating with the public and so on. You know, at some point, somebody's saying, oh, so what happened during this time? Say, what do you mean? Everything that's happening now is not just envisaged. It is in the Constitution and in plethora of acts of parliament. So we know, we have all the information. Yeah, so again, for me, things like those erratic opening dates of the schools, as far as I'm concerned, is inexcusable. In fact, I'm restraining myself to say that they're incompetent, but they're unexcusable. I think there's a better word.
Or a breakdown of communication.
No, it's not a breakdown of communication.
The communication reached.
That was about to use a very, very serious word. So.
Okay. All right. So I knew you had something to say about that, Dennis. And again, this topic of death of the ruling party, Jubilee, follows KANU footsteps. Decimated and a pale shadow of its glory days, ruling Jubilee Party faces a bleak future. It is walking a path trodden by PNU, NARC, and the Independence Party, KANU. And Prof, I'm still going through a few more stories, but keep this in mind.
Right.
You know, in 2017, actually from 2013 up to 2017, Uhuru and Ruto told us, you know, these things of tribal parties should come to an end. And, you know, we all need to come under one ideology. And people abandoned their parties in favor of Jubilee. How has that played out? Because as far as this last election was concerned, it was like it was the resurgence of the small parties. So is the situation in Kenya different from that in the UK and the US, where you have the liberals and the conservatives? We'll get into that. We'll get into that. So just keep that in mind. I see here mixed legacy, Mount Kenya's deep love and raw hate for Uhuru. It's a full circle for President Kenyatta in his political career, spanning about a quarter century. It started with rejection, morphed into love, and ended in rejection. Cost of living, unga price to rise as subsidy ends. With campaign season having ended, state now says it cannot sustain expensive subsidy that kept the cost of staple at 100 shillings per 2 kg packet. The Ministry of Agriculture has denied this. Okay, and on the other side, before I get into the main story on the front page of the Daily Nation, on the other side, Dennis, maybe you could read that for us? So
we have faces here, and we're looking at Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, Moses Wetangula, Ali Roba, Fred Matiang'i, Hassan Joho, Salim Vuria, Eugene Omalo, and Rigathi. And so enter the kingmakers of 2022 polls. And that story is in 3 pages, actually, on the Sunday Nation, 19, 20, and 21. So they staked their reputations. The reputations, time, and resources to support their chosen political causes, and they did deliver the numbers in the Tuesday elections. Now is payback time from the big two. That is Ruto and Raila Odinga.
And I can see here they are, now finally, in the center of the page. Dual Azimio Kenya Kwanza claim presidential win. Mind games, the Raila-Ruto power balance. And here we see in terms of elective office, the wins on either side, 19 governors-elect on the Azimio side, 21 governors-elect on the Kenya Kwanza side, 22 senators-elect on the Azimio side, 24 on the Kenya Kwanza side, 141 MPs-elect on the Azimio side, 149 MPs-elect on the Kenya Kwanza side. Deputy President and Azimio La Umoja leader Odinga's political camp seek to energize their bases as the long wait for the official IEBC announcement tests the patience of a nation already fatigued by long political campaigns and the high cost of living. And Prof, another question for you to jot down. I hope you're jotting this down.
Yes.
Yeah, I see you have is that a black book like Leila Mohammed's at the Bomas of Kenya?
No, it's grey.
It's a grey. You'll have a grey book. In your grey book.
It's not totally black.
My second question, just from the front page of the Daily Nation, and we haven't even gone too far, is I remember when the election was annulled in 2017, the presidential election, and William Ruto asked, how can we have the majority in parliament and then be said to have stolen the presidential election? Do these numbers, are they a true indicator of which way the presidential election will go? Because yesterday we saw Azimio bring together those who succeeded in the elections and host them at the Kenya International Convention Center as show of might. You know, do these numbers, are they a true indicator of which way the presidential election will go? Dennis, did you have something to add?
No.
Yeah, I think
I'm just curious to hear what Prof has to say.
Oh, okay. So do you want him to address it?
Yes.
All right.
That's actually great. And I think this is not really precedented. Same thing, we've raised this issue that Kenyans don't like to calculate. They hate arithmetic, they hate numbers, they hate facts. You see, even in single counties, we've had a situation where the governor is from one party, the senator is from another party, the woman rep is from another party, the MCAs are from another party. I think it's very simplistic to argue that because say majority MCAs came from a particular party, then the governor must automatically come from that party. And that has been going on forever. In fact, my friend Ali Roba, who's now, well, I mean, let me not declare that, from Mandera, actually won the Mandera governor seat in the previous election with almost 0 MCAs from his party. Yeah, so the way, I think it's simplistic. And we've had president, we had a case here of Kibaki winning elections with a party that is almost extinct. It was called PNU. People had all sorts of derogatory variations of that. But when Kibaki was winning there, PNU actually had virtually no seats in parliament. I think what's good during this time, of course, I mean, we've not consolidated all the numbers, but what is good around this time is that the two contenders, the UDP Kenya Kwanza and Azimio, they do have significant numbers. They do have significant numbers of governors. They have significant numbers of senators. They've got significant numbers of in the National Assembly. Yeah. So for me, I'm not overly worried about who has absolute numbers. And then, of course, we also have the fringe parties like PA and DAP Kenya and Ford Kenya and so on, also actually being present there. And yes, we know that the president will come from either of the two major parties. And like we observed yesterday, they don't really need to have absolute, in fact, they will not have the constitutional absolute majority that will enable them, you know, to make constitutional changes. But they will have numbers, even if the numbers don't hit 50%. They will have either side will have reasonable numbers, that, you know, with a small group of allies, you know, they would be able to, you know, pass the different legislation and the different, you know, processes that, you know, that you need to actually run government on a day-to-day basis. So, in fact, from where I sit, it doesn't really matter. And of course, from a logical point of view, you do not need to have majority in Parliament to be declared president. In fact, it's not even one of the requirements in our constitution. So whatever is being said outside there is purely for optics. I think it's just for politics. It has nothing to do with anything. You cannot even bring that argument to a court of law and say that, look, I mean, we had majority members of Parliament, therefore we won this election. There are no such provisions, you know, in our law.
And I'm curious, still on the question of elections in 2017.
Right.
We saw the presidential election announced,
Right.
and the question was, how can you claim the presidential election was illegitimate?
Right.
And then all these other people were legitimately elected. And the process was the same.
Yes, and still just adding to that. I mean, if you have a concern that you know, that we have this situation where somebody can't get elected president with no member of parliament, as it were, from his party, then a crazy situation, I mean, a hypothetical situation. Supposing an independent candidate for the presidency won. That'll be a very interesting one, you know, where you're alone in parliament. But of course, advanced democracies have cured this a little bit differently. The Electoral College, for example, in the US, is just meant to deal with that, so that, you know, you must actually win a particular number of counties and so on. But I think we also have that here anyway. But the way we do it is not an electoral college model where you take away an entire county. We say that you must actually get a particular number of votes in a number of counties to be declared president.
Yeah, 25%
exactly.
And above in at least 24 counties.
Exactly, in 24 counties. Okay. Yeah, so we have something that ensures that you know, the president actually reflects, you know, the face of the republic, as it were.
Okay. And so still on that story, and you were talking about how IEBC itself is admitting that this process is slow, but here IEBC laments slow verification of forms 334B by agents. So they're saying it is the agents, these political party agents, these presidential candidate agents who are the ones who are slowing the process down. Both coalitions informed their supporters that they are poised to win the presidency as the tallying goes on. Deputy President William Ruto and Azimio la Umoja leader Raila Odinga's political camps yesterday played high-level mind games in a bit to energize their bases, while both claiming victory in the Tuesday presidential polls ahead of the long-awaited official announcement of the results. The Azimio coalition, led by Mr. Odinga's running mate, Martha Karua, called all its newly elected MPs and governors from across the country to a meeting in Nairobi in what appeared to be a show of strength and might for the party. The coalition argued that it had won a majority of seats both in Parliament and in the counties, which has been debunked on the front page of the Daily Nation, but there's still seats pending. So we wait for those ones and see who emerges with a majority. And terming it an indication of its numerical strength, which it said would also translate to victory in the yet-to-be-announced presidential race. DP Ruto's running mate, Rigathi Gachagua, in a pointed tweet that appeared to be an apparent reaction to the Azimio meeting, asked supporters of the Kenya Kwanza Alliance to await the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission official announcement, claiming that their own tally showed the alliance had won the presidential race. All is well. Relax, good people. Don't be drawn into sideshows. We have no time for their usual drama. Our business right now is verification of Forms 34A and 34B at the National Tallying Center. My question, Prof, is this: why do they find it necessary to do this? Why can't they, if you're so sure of a win, just shut up, forgive my language, be quiet and allow the IEBC to do its job and wait for the results? It is Kenyan
culture. Both political and just public culture. Apart from them, there are people who have actually lost other seats. You know, you find somebody's running for governor, they've lost by almost, you know, 200,000 votes. they're doing 25, while the person winning, you know, does 75. And this person is willing to go to court, in fact, announcing that he's going to go to court because it was unfair and so on. And we've seen Kenyans, you abuse the court process, you know, go to court even when they're obviously wrong, but of course lawyers will always tell you that there's nothing like that. Let's go through the process and actually, you know, be able to determine this. And I think that's why in the wisdom of IBC and of course everybody else, whatever the guys are saying outside there is all rumors, because it's actually good that Wajakoya has not declared himself winner or Maure. But that's actually what you're seeing, because like you're saying correctly, you have a process. This process is going to end. In fact, the worst case scenario, we only have two more days, Monday and Tuesday, and the process will actually come to an end. So why are you making these claims? And you're making them against, because I trust, I've been talking about these arithmetics, but Azimio and Kenya Kwanza actually had agents in all those 46,226 polling stations. They actually have the information. They know the information. So one of them must be lying when they're telling us that they won. Either that or one of them, you know, had major errors, you know, while they're doing their tallies, or one of them, you know, actually knows that they've lost, but is hoping that an error or something might happen that will actually make them win, which is a reasonable hope in a hotly contested election. And I think that's why it makes sense that responsible agencies, like relatively responsible agencies like the media, you know, stopped their tallying, you know, because when these guys are all over the place disputing numbers and claiming that they have the correct numbers and so on, some of course going ahead to declare victory, while of course we know it's impossible for everybody to win in an election.
But Prof, right, you know, the preemptive declarations that are, you know, made by these politicians, whether explicit or implicit,
right,
it's not something new.
Exactly.
And lawyers say that the law is very clear.
Yes.
But it has never been clear. It's never clear. So when we see this kind of preemptive declarations,
right,
the outcomes of what then their supporters, their bases, is this not dangerous and being irresponsible?
Dennis, I cannot agree with you more, and that's why I alluded to the fact that you know, amongst the different players in the market there that are believed or influence public opinion, that what the media did was the correct thing, because in this sort of situation, you can imagine if people are outside there saying, but you know, NTV declared our candidate the winner, and the other one is saying no, KTN declared our candidate the winner. You see, because for people outside there is perception. Yes. And they'll be willing to go to street to die because their victory has been stolen. And that's partly why, in fact, I think if you look at the media, then we look at the two major contesting parties, I think, you know, and IBC, but IBC is not even in this, when I look at public participation. I think the media has done the right thing. They're saying, look here, in a hotly contested situation like this, and you know, a tallying process that's quite close, and that can actually have error. You know, I mean, because we're not using alphanumeric data, we're actually using images. It's possible to mistake a speck, you know, on the form there to be a 1, and that one, depending on where it's located, and we're already seeing that, might actually change the results of the presidential election in a close contest. And what the media has done on this one, I'll defend the media. What the media has done is the correct thing, to say, no, we're not tallying, because this election is close, and any small error can actually result in giving the impression that one person has won, while maybe that's not the correct situation. The two contenders, the political parties, are doing the opposite. They're actually letting their bases know that they've actually won. And to me, I think that is really irresponsible. What they should be telling the base is that, hold on, the IBC has 7 days. Like you said, IBC is not slow. IBC has 7 days. It is only when IBC tells us that the process is slow that they're saying they're slow. And tell guys, look at this thing is going to be announced latest on Tuesday. And that will be the number. If you have issues around that number, we'll actually contest it in court. And that's just what it should be. Instead of, jumping all over the place, declaring that you've won an election whose results are not yet out.
Okay. And speaking of said results, on, this is page what? 5 of the Daily Nation, and tight race for State House as vote count on. Right. Errors in forms uploaded from polling station threaten to slow the tallying process.
Right.
And this report is by Collins Omulo and Samuel Owino. Azimio presidential candidate Raila Odinga and Deputy President William Ruto are neck and neck in the race to State House, with results from 96 out of 291 constituencies tallied, even as errors in forms threaten to slow the process. Now, this was at the time of going to print. Right. Leila Mohammed did tell us results came in at 4 a.m.
Right.
The United Democratic Alliance presidential candidate was leading with 2,879,409 votes against the ODM party leaders, 2,747,263 votes. According to the figures by the IBC, the two political rivals were only separated by 132,146 votes. But errors in forms uploaded from polling stations threaten to slow the tallying process. Are these errors... There was a contention that these are not quote-unquote errors, right. That this was intentional and orchestrated. But do errors such as these happen? Because IBC was even ready to record said errors for the Supreme Court. Right. So is it sometimes just human error? Someone hasn't slept, they're tired, the one looks like a 7,
Yes, of course. I mean, it's a process, and the database is very big. It would be, it would be impossible for such a process not to actually have errors. It's only that those errors should not be substantial to the extent that they distort, the outcome of the polls. This is normal things in terms of large data. You cannot actually eliminate that 100%. And IBC, in terms of improvement of their systems, these are some of the issues that they should actually be dealing with, when they audit the system. To start looking at where distortions would actually come from, and then keep refining those systems so that those human errors are reduced and if possible actually eliminated. Of course, that is partly why in the structuring, the numbers of people in a polling station, such things are determined, to actually reduce error. Yeah, so definitely, but errors would happen, just like you're saying. Somebody will write a 1 that looks like a 7, or somebody might actually read it as a 7 as such. Somebody may write an 8 that looks like a 0, and yes, so this may not even be an. It'll be an error in terms of the transfer of that information. The person who wrote it. And even the people who saw it may have realized that it was actually an 8, and hence the verification and the tallying. Yeah, but definitely what you're saying is that our electoral processes should actually reduce, if not eliminate these sort of errors as much as possible. But of course, they're also looking at it the other way around. That on the other hand, we have human error, but on the other hand, we also just have corrupt humans who are hell-bent on sending the wrong information there. And again, if you look at the numbers of people who are involved in this particular process, you are looking at hundreds of thousands of people. It is not reasonable to assume that all these are guys who are going to the Church of the Holy Minority, where the fear of God and the law, guides people and they are as straight as rail. As we said before, in fact, I would put it like almost 50% of these guys would be crooked. The guys would commit a crime as long as they're not being seen. So yes, that is partly why the process is there, the verification, the tallying, and so on, to be able to weed out this first mischief and then, of course, just normal human error.
Okay. And I see that Dr. Caroline Muse has joined us, as well as Mwalimu Sam Mudhoka, Director Ipsos. Karibuni sana. We'll just get them mic'd before we get their views on this subject. And the errors, Prof, if I could just highlight some of those which were flagged yesterday. A number of inconsistencies in Forms 34A and 34B on the IEBC portal raised eyebrows over the figures being announced by the electoral agency. For instance, at Bomani Primary School polling station in Kilifi County, County. The uploaded form indicates that Mr. Odinga got 991 votes, Ruto 81, Wajakoya 5, while Maure got nothing. It is not possible for a candidate to get 991 in a polling station, as the number of voters per polling station was capped at 700 by IEBC. Interestingly, the presiding officer recorded the total number of votes cast as 285. The Electoral Commission also yesterday flagged 10,000 votes in Kiambu Town constituency that was erroneously given to DP Ruto, announcing verified presidential results from various constituencies at the Bomas of Kenya Auditorium. Commissioner Justice Nyang'aya pointed out the initial figures showed that UDA presidential candidate garnered 51,050 votes, but it was noticed that there was an error in Form 34A, which were corrected in Form 34C, where the correct figure was captured at 41,050. Now, let me see this, he also pointed out that in the Ndigwa primary school station, Mr. Odinga was captured as having gotten 11 votes, while the correct figure was 111. Mr. Nyang'aya said the anomaly was corrected and the correct figure entered. At Kiptende Primary polling station 2 in Kuresoi South, Nakuru County, votes cast didn't tally with what the agent wrote down. According to what has been uploaded at the IEBC on the IEBC portal, Mr. Odinga got 5 votes, Ruto 322. Mr. Maure got 0, while Mr. Wajakoya got 2 votes. This translates to 329 votes cast. But in the final tally, the presiding officer has recorded that total votes cast were 331, leaving 2 votes unaccounted for. The station has 426 voters. I could go on and on. I'm seeing something in Gem constituency. I'm seeing an error here from in Turkana West, Lopur Primary School. In such a tightly contested election, you know, we are saying neck and neck.
Right.
Can we afford these errors? And then there are those who worry that these changes to what was announced, because initially we're told what is announced at the polling station is final. These changes, people now are like, now they're trying to cook the figures, they're trying to reduce the number of votes our candidate won. What do you make of it?
Yes, you know, there can be errors, but I think, again, the Constitution and the framers of the Constitution emphasize this. You see, I mean, if errors are happening in a transparent system, then you can actually attribute them to human error. You will not actually imagine that it is mischief. Let me use some examples. The Kiambu bit that Justice was announcing. Justice explained that the correct figure, whatever was written, is not what was read. So basically, what could have brought in confusion was that what was read was 51,000, what was written was 41,050. And that's possible. I mean, as you are reading, you know, the brain gets tired and so on. But in this situation, what was written was actually correct. But how it was presented was not correct. It's not like Kiambu then got additional votes. That is normal human error, and you can pick that. We believe that because everybody was there and they agreed, and in fact they said that you know, both parties, you know, had no issue because the forms reflected the correct figure. But of course, you look at the Bomani one, and the sort of the way the numbers jump around, 991, and then of course you're looking at 285 voters, and a maximum in terms of
700 per polling station.
Per polling station, and you look at that and say, no, this is not a normal human error. This smells more like mischief, and again, this is not new. I mean, we saw in the last petitions of the presidential elections. I think it was Wanjala, Justice Wanjala, asking a very interesting question that you know, if in a polling station, for example, somebody, these are just my own figures, the governors, you know, votes are say 200,000, and then you know, the total, and then the total for presidential is say, you know, 250,000. What does that mean? Does it mean that some people then didn't vote for these other candidates? And there's a lawyer who tried to suggest that that was the case. But then he was asked that then where would those ballots go?
I think Kiliki Nyandwi raised the same thing yesterday.
Where would those ballots actually go? Because at the end of the day, you can't leave a polling station with ballots, whether you've signed them or not. There must be in some box, and you know, when the counting is being done, those ballots will actually be counted, and they'll be counted as you know, those spoiled votes and so on. You can't have a situation where the total tally of the ballots cast then actually become different. But anyway, that was flagged by Supreme Court as mischief, as it actually were. Yeah. So definitely, I think with these errors, what would be interesting eventually is to see whether there's a pattern, is to see the extent of those errors, whether they are negligible or not, and so on, and then of course to see whether the human errors and so on and so forth. So far, I don't think we've had such a huge number of errors, and both parties and IBC have more or less agreed, including the ones that have to be set aside. But of course, we can only comment.
I can see Dennis adjusting his sitting position, which indicates to me that there's a burning question.
There's a burning question, but I will ask that question after we take a break. It's 10 minutes past 8. It's Sunday. Who would have expected we'll be here doing this on a Sunday? But we have to continue with the job. The verification of the presidential results ongoing at Bomas. And we'll keep hearing more. We have so many talking points as we go through the newspaper review here, Olive. Yeah,
and I'm curious to hear what the numbers man, that is who's seated and mic'd, has to say about those errors. The other day was telling us about a 95% confidence. Is this now the 5% that we are not so sure about? On the other side of this break.